Welcome back to episode 2 of our Circle in Time podcast. We are going to dig deeper into Forever Now, our second album.
Woo!
Woohoo!
So I feel like this album, there was a lot of feelings about.
This is a big album for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the mood?
I think you should talk about the mood because I think this was the point where you decided that there's a whole concept evolving around all our albums, right?
Yeah, there was a lot of. I think everything was the most natural, free flowing. Didn't think about anything. Didn't know what to expect. So we weren't worried about anything, and we weren't thinking about anything other than the music. And I think Forever Now felt like we had made this album that we really loved, that we're really proud of, that people had really loved, that had been very successful. And I felt a lot of pressure. It was like second album syndrome, you know. I was like, oh no, we're not gonna be able to do it again. And I was really nervous about it. But at the same time, we were making a lot of really great music. Mm-hmm. So I was feeling like confident and happy with what we were making. We started to think about the imagery and like, what's this album going to be like? And I remember feeling like I wanted it to feel like a continuation of the first album.
Yeah.
So the first album, Rich Robinson, who did the art, came up with this great cover, which wasn't originally supposed to be the cover. We had chosen a different cover, but that ended up being the cover because of various circumstances. And he designed, we kind of came up with this idea of using the forest, like tree, as the sort of symbol, which we put on our merch.
Yep.
So we were sort of like, cool, the forest and the tree kind of became the sort of vibe. And so I was like, well, what if we made water the sort of theme of the second one? And once we kind of did that, then it was sort of like, okay, well, if it's water, then it's like blue and purple. And then we started to kind of have a feeling for like the record and like a bit of a container. Mm-hmm. And then it ended up becoming, you know, like the horizon. So it was like the sky and the water, but it was sort of this idea that we'd have like different elements. And I think that really helped form a sort of solid. I feel like I need containers to put our music in because we make so much music that when I'm like, cool, this goes here, it's like a kid with toys, you know? It's like, where do all my toys go, you know?
For sure. Well, I think also because in university, you obviously studied religious studies.
Yeah.
You had a lot of like theses and, you know, essays that you would write about stuff. And so I feel like everything was always like you had to conceptualize stuff and it helped you kind of like focus.
Yes, it does help.
And so I'm like, you do that because I can't do that.
Yeah. But I think that makes it fun. It's like to sort of conceptualize where these albums, where these songs go, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think that was also the beginning, and we'll talk about it later, but I think the beginning of it, seeing it as a trilogy. Mm-hmm. So this was a continuation. So we wanted the title to be similar with like one word, comma, and then another word, and have it almost be a little bit of a paradox, like Forever Now.
Yep.
So yeah, the mood was exciting, but I was very nervous.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was on the opposite side of it.
Yeah. You were feeling good.
I was feeling good.
Yeah.
I was like, we did it. We can keep doing it. And I think we have a lot more to present and put out there and do and write, and we're still super inspired. There was no like end of ideas.
That was what was making me kind of not lose it. And we were touring. But
we'd also like done a bunch of really cool instrumentals.
Yeah.
Like right after Something Everything.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a collaboration with Jero, with Wes.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
We had done the instrumentals for Eleanor. We had done the instrumentals for I don't know, a whole bunch of them. We did the song with Ben Rustang.
Yeah.
Like right after that.
Yeah.
And we just held on to it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then for some of those tracks, well, do you want to talk about some of the tracks that were, I guess maybe people wouldn't know that they were like, they kind of have become essential records for that album, but.
Well, I think the biggest record on that was Making Time.
One of them, yeah.
Yeah. And when we first got the vocal from Julia and her team,
it was for her.
It was for her.
Yeah.
And so we tried to produce it as like a different kind of record for her. And then over time, it took on different iterations. And her team came back at one point and was saying, we don't want it for Julia, but we'd love to do it as a collaboration with you guys if you guys want to take it for yourselves. And and so I had to fight you.
Yeah, I wasn't sure that it was gonna be on the album because not because I didn't love the song. Julia's gonna hate me. She's like, nah. But like I love that song. It was just hard because I always thought it was her song.
I know.
And so it took me a while to.
I remember obviously I'd spend different hours during the day when you weren't around working on different parts of it, being like, this song has to work and this song is going to be on the album.
Yeah. No, and it's become but I think for me, it made it our own when we did the mashup with Liu's track, Cycles. And I feel like that version kind of was like, because of the original version we couldn't play out and it was too chill to play in the clubs.
Right. So
we did that version and then that kind of became the sort of definitive version of the song. And I always felt more connected to that one than the original.
Interesting. It's funny because I go back now, the only one I listen to is the original.
So funny.
Because we play the other one out all the time. Yeah, it's much more of a dance floor record.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then the other track that almost was not on the album because it was so close to the deadline was Zima.
That's right.
And it was an instrumental, and we loved the instrumental. I was so emotional. It was like my favorite instrumental ever. And we had Delhia de France on our list of people, and we had sent her some stuff and we didn't hear back, and we just thought,
we thought she was so cool that we weren't cool enough for her to be on one of our records.
We just thought it was like, we reached out and we didn't hear back, and then like with like a week to go before we turned in the masters,
remember Tabby sent us
the vocal. She said, hey, Delhia got back, here's the vocal, and then that track became like one of our favorites.
Yep. That also made it so much harder to choose the singles for this album because that record was now in the mix.
Yes. It's hard to imagine the album without Making Time without Zima.
I have you to thank for the making of that record because I remember you're like, why don't you just put down some riff? And I remember at that point in my life, it was super chaotic. Things were happening. So I just put down this riff and I literally walked out. It was like 2 or 3 minutes.
No, I remember differently. I remember I came in and you were working on the riff and I was like, this is so good. And you were like, no, it's only half. I need another half. And I was like, no, just that is so good. It's so amazing. Like, da, da, da. And you were like, really? It needs to like go somewhere. And I was like, no, I know exactly what to do.
Yeah, and then I left.
You left and I came back and I had done like a bunch of stuff around it. But like, that was the thing. Is like, I walked in, I just remember, I was like, oh my God. And I remember, this is a funny story. My girlfriend worked on the movie Marcel the Shell and she invited me to a screening at CAA. And I went. And I just remember that movie is so emotional. If anyone's seen it,
I love it.
It's so good. And I came out of the screen and I skipped the after party. She called me and she's like, where are you? And I had already driving home because I was like crying. And I just remember listening to Zima, like the instrumental, like on repeat. And I was just like, so that track is pretty special.
You didn't tell me that story.
Yeah. I just zipped out of the thing and she called me. She's like, are you driving home? And I was like, yep. And she's like, are you crying? And I was like, yes. Bye. Hung up. But I just remember I was like, I want to hear that track. But we'll come back to track listings in a sec because I want to talk to you about what was going on in your life. You said that things were hectic in your life. So they were very, very hectic. What was going on?
Things were hectic. At least leading up to like the second half of that writing of the second half of that album, it was, so we had done a bunch of songs and then my mom had been diagnosed with lung cancer for the past 7 years at that point. And it got to a point where her time was up and like doctors said she had 6 months to live. So at the time she was living in LA with me, just to make sure she was getting her treatment, and we were doing all kinds of trials, and it was just a crazy, crazy time. But when the doctors told us there shouldn't have much time left, my mom decided she wanted to go back and be in Egypt. And so she flew back, and I told her I told the family, like her sisters who were in Egypt with her, as soon as she starts to feel like it's coming, to let me know, because we knew at the time that it had metastasized to her brain, and we knew at that time, and her spine, that she would be pretty much disabled. She'd wake up one day and be disabled. And anyway, so, and at the time, my wife was also pregnant. So I remember it was November 15th. I got a call from my aunt, and she said, "You better fly back today because we don't know how much longer she has." And my wife at this point was 8.5 months pregnant. So I flew back that morning. I had just missed her. And we had to deal with so much stuff that happens after you lose a loved one and everything that comes with that. But I had a timeline, and it was like I needed to be there with my family for my mom and her funeral, and then I had to fly back and catch my daughter before she was born. And so it was
Which you did.
which I did.
Yeah.
And I got back, and my daughter was born like 3 days later. But anyway, it was a crazy time.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of loss, but there was also the bright future of having a baby and everything that comes with that. So I think emotionally it was the craziest roller coaster of my life. And I think musically that came out after the whole situation happened.
And then you took like 3 or 4 weeks
Yep.
where you were like dealing with all of that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you were alone in the studio.
I was alone in the studio, and I was
Yeah.
like, what am I gonna do, you know?
Because we gotten so used to making music together, it's just weird
Yeah.
to do it on your own.
Forever Now, the song Forever Now came from that period.
Mm-hmm.
I think I wanted to make something really positive.
Yeah. I think a lot of the stuff we did afterwards was more positive.
Yeah.
I think it was a good turning point and an important balance for this album.
Yeah. Concord came after that.
Mm-hmm.
Sirens came after that. Yeah, very uplifting. I think, and I feel like the album to me feels like a very uplifting. Not as sad as Endless Dawn and Something Everything.
Yeah.
To me, this is the brighter one.
It is a brighter one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like it actually represents a bright moment. I feel like things were happening. We were touring a lot.
Yeah.
We were playing. Everything was growing.
Yep.
I felt like a really good time. We were just going, you know, and I think that gets reflected in. There's some sad lyrics in this album, but I think the music is pretty uplifting.
I agree.
You want to talk about the track listing? Because I think it's interesting. It's interesting about how this album became this album.
So I can't remember even how many tracks we had when we did this.
30
It
plus.
was like 30 plus. Yeah. And we had done with Something Everything, we had 14 tracks. And so we thought with this one, we'd have 14 too, or something around there. And I remember we sent it to Dan, and he was like,
We had 30 tracks to Dan.
yeah. We compiled a shorter list. And then he was like, well, I think you should make it even more
Yeah.
concise to the point, shorten this whole list to like 10 or 11 tracks. And I think we had a really tough time with
I
that.
got so stressed.
Yeah.
Because we had songs on there, Under the Surface,
Highest Love,
Highest Love,
Forever Now.
Panama one,
Oh, yeah.
Falling Behind.
I'm Behind.
Those were all made during that time.
Endless Dawn.
Yeah, Back Through You, like all these
Back
tracks.
Through You.
Somehow he was like, this is the album. Like we kind of whittled it down to 11 songs.
Yeah.
And we were really stressed because we were like, these tracks, like, how are they not going to be on this album?
Mm-hmm. And we're like, why do we do a double album?
So then we had this idea to do a double album. And he was like, and we talked to the label about it. We talked to Dan. I just remember he was like, yeah. He was like, you guys can. He's like, I'm not going to say no. He's like, I would just maybe consider splitting it into 2 albums and we can put another one out like next year.
Yeah.
And I think once he said that, and that was when it was like, oh, the 3rd album. And I was like, yep, trilogy. Like now I see it. It was like, you know, it was like the womb and the fetus. And it was just like, boop, another baby. Like you could see it. And I was like, okay, perfect. And then that kind of created the container. And as soon as that happened, I like totally relaxed. And I was like, perfect. This is going to be all these like beautiful, uplifting songs. And then the 3rd album, we're going to like come back and like kill it again, you know, like, so I was like very stoked about that separation.
Yeah.
It made sense in my mind. So we talked about, on the first episode, we talked about the first headline show after Something Everything, which was in Seattle, and how special that was. So we announced the album and the tour in December of 2022. And then the album came out February 23, and our first tour date was the same day that the album came out, which we will not do again.
Ever again.
Need at least a few weeks, if not a few months.
Yeah.
because it's a really hectic day, and to add travel and all that stuff on it was very stressful. We showed up and it was Dallas. There was this club, It'll Do, which is a very special place, and we'd already played there on the Something Everything tour, and we had the best
time ever. Yeah.
One of the most amazing nights. We showed up and it was like the album had just come out that day, and people were already singing the words to like every track that we played, and we were like, this is insane.
Yeah.
Such a good night. And we have this picture. I took a photo. I got this little digital camera from the 90s.
You thought you were so cool.
I thought it was so cool. I was like, I'm gonna capture this tour on like this nostalgic like camera that you and I used to own.
Yeah.
And I was like taking all these pictures. Most of them came out horribly, but I still have some good ones. But I took a photo at the end of the night. I remember I wanted to play Forever Now. I was like really like, that track was really special for me, and I felt like it's hard to play in a set, but I was like, what if we encore with it? And so we got to the end of the set and everybody was still there, and we had like one more track. And I was like, let's just play it. And I just remember like it went off. People went crazy. And I took a photo of this girl in the crowd, because It'll Do is like a really small room. So you can kind of, from the DJ booth, you can see everybody. And the lights had kind of come on at that point. It was like just a perfect like end of the night. And this girl had this, her hands were like on her face, and she had this look of like, my mind was just like like exploded. And and I snapped a photo of her and I posted it on our carousel of slides from like that weekend.
Yeah.
And I just remember, and then she messaged and was like, that's me. Like some random girl messaged and was like, that's me in the thing. And I was like, oh, that's so funny. And then when we went and played Australia later
it's a year later.
Yeah, a year later, she had moved to Melbourne. Emily, she's our friend now, and she just like popped up and was like, that was me in the picture, like you guys are so amazing. And I don't know, it just sort of like it captured that moment for me. Like it really kind of like the look on her face, I was like, that's how I feel. Like, you know, like she kind of got it. And it was very sweet that actually she became someone that we knew, and so it was nice.
That was awesome.
Oh, I know a track I wanted to talk to you about was R&R.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because there's some nice stories around that one.
So we had just gotten back from playing Red Rocks with Daniel.
Yeah.
And we came into the studio, and I remember you're just like, I just want to do some stuff that sounds like some old school stuff from like 1999 or something. And then you put down this riff. And then we just went with it. We put a trance kick on it, and then the bass line. And I remember when we were like halfway through it, I'm like, why are we doing this? Like, this is not going to fit into what we're doing.
And it sounded crappy.
It sounded crappy.
And we left it.
Yeah.
And then when we were listening back through a bunch of stuff, right? And we were sort of like, what else have we been working on? I was like, oh, what is that trancey thing? And we like pressed play, and we were like, this is cool. And then I think...
And then we sent it to Dan.
You put a different kick. You're like, you need to change the kick drum. And then we made it sound good. And we sent it to Dan. We just thought he's never going to be into it.
You thought he was going to be into it. I was like, there's no way he's going to be into it. And then
he wrote back immediately and was like, this is awesome. Like, send me the wave, send me the extended version. And then he opened his his next Red Rock set with it. He opened his mixtape. And it kind of became an anthem from the album.
Became a big record for us.
And it was this close to just never even leaving our hard drive.
Yep.
That's how it happens, you know? It's like you
Totally.
just don't know in the moment what's going to make sense and what's going to work.
Yeah. I think that's a great thing about having Dan, because we get to bounce stuff out by him all the time, and he'll guide us in the right direction.
And now we just send everything because it's like, you never know. So
I remember a lot of other things that kind of like were kind of crazy with this album. The crazy Malibu shoot that we had.
Yeah. So after Something Everything, we did this pandemic era thing where we did a DJ set in the middle of nowhere in this beautiful property in Topanga, and it was awesome, and it got tons of views. And I wore a Corinthians jersey from Brazil, Sao Paulo soccer team that I saw, 15 years ago. The original Ronaldo, saw him play. It was amazing. And I became a Corinthians fan. I was like, I'm going to wear this jersey, whatever. And it had, like, the video ends up with like 2 million views, and a blog in Brazil picked it up, and it went viral there. It was like crazy. So, and all the comments half the comments are people from Brazil. It's so cool. So I just remember I was like, okay, I'm going to wear a Corinthians jersey again. and we're gonna film it somewhere that looks like the album cover. We got to find, you know, a horizon. So we chose Malibu. We found this beautiful property that overlooks the ocean. You can get the same kind of vantage point, and we worked with our lovely people at Noise House, and we were like, cool, how's the weather looking? It's the middle of February. And they were like, relax. And we were like, it just can't rain, it just can't rain. We were trying to figure out the days, and then we chose a day a couple weeks before the tour started, and we showed up, and it was like pouring rain.
Remember, we were on our way there and it was pouring rain.
Rain all day. This is gonna be horrible. It's just gray, and then
it was like a big fog and a big cloud. You couldn't even see the water anymore.
You couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
It was terrible. And then at like 5 o'clock, it was like you could see like a little bit of the horizon. We're like, okay, well, that's good enough. And it just turned into the most incredible. It was like the rain just like disappeared and the most incredible sunset happened. And
you'll probably see us during this whole set. Like you see us turning around every like 5 minutes, being like, "Is it moving? Is it moving?"
Yeah, you can check it out. And I think it's like it gets better. Like the very beginning of the set, it's kind of still moody, and by the end, it's just like magic. And I think that set sort of actually really summed up sort of how we were playing. I mean, we did the Making Time mashup for that set.
That's right.
And we did a couple other things like for that set, and I think that really helped sort of shape how we DJ'd that music.
And what's interesting too is we put not a lot, but like 2 or 3 records that ended up on Endless Dawn in that set.
That's right. Highest Love and then something then Looking For on the trilogy. Time. Yeah, it was on that. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot. That's the music that we made for Forever Now. I think that this is like my takeaway was that like we just made so much music. Yeah. Half of it ended up on Endless Dawn. The rest of it, half of it ended up on Circle in Time. Like it just was like so much stuff.
Yeah.
Because I think we were really inspired.
Okay, we are back with Dan.
Hello, hello.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the podcast, and we are going to dive into Forever Now. This was a very confusing, difficult album to actually maneuver in the beginning because I think Ned and I had so much music, and we kind of threw it all out there, and you came back with a much clearer, concise idea of how you envisioned this album being. With everything, we had 14 tracks. With this one, you're like, I think we should really narrow it down and hone in on like the best ones that we have. So we were curious how you had that, why you had that vision and why it was so clear for you. And whereas for us, it was really like confusing.
This is the role, one of the roles of an A&R. I think it's a lot easier to make those kind of decisions when you're not quite as close to it. Because for you guys, those are like all you might have written 20, 25 tracks for the album, and you love all of them, and those are your babies. And it's like just getting rid of one of them to get from 25 to 24 would be like just like taking a piece of your heart out. And I get that, but when you're not quite so close to it, it's just much easier. Back at that time, we each made lists, right? Didn't we all make a list?
Yeah.
And it was kind of uncanny, like how similar they were, save for like 1 or 2 tracks, maybe.
Right.
So I think, yeah, when you're forced to you just have to do it, just make a list. I think that makes it easier. It's also just like it's a blessing because you had so many good tracks. And that's really what you need. Like you need a big pool to pick from, and then you pick the best, ideally, and that becomes the album. You're quite prolific in the studio. You make a lot of things. That definitely helps because a lot of people will toil over one idea for 6 months, whereas like in 6 months, you guys will make 15 tracks. So it's a luxury to have that selection.
Yeah, but I think also what we realized when we were having this conversation the other day was like that even if you're working on a track for a long time and you think it's really great, it just might not ever get there. But the track that if you start a new idea the next day, for some reason, that track might just be like, boom, it's awesome and it's done in like 3 days.
I always like to tell people like I've never once regretted trying to make a new song. Like yes, sometimes it doesn't really go anywhere, but it's always a good idea to try to start something new. And so many people talk about this, but it really is true that a lot of the best ideas and tracks come together very quickly. I think working on something for a really long period of time and really like bleeding on it is, I mean, it's admirable, I guess, but like a lot of times it's just like you just need to move on.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be that hard.
Yeah. On that note, R&R was a track that came together pretty quickly for us, and we almost didn't send it to you because we thought you wouldn't like it, and then it sort of became the defining moment on that album in a lot of ways, and you remixed it.
I think we spent like a good week talking about like, should we send it to him?
Yeah, we were. It was. Like,
So I was like, he's not gonna like this. So why are you gonna send it to him?
and I was like, at that point, I was already like, well, I don't know. He's kind of unpredictable, so like, we might as well. Worst thing he's gonna say no. And we were reading through all these emails from that album like this week, and it was really funny because like some of the emails, like we would send you batches of tracks, you know, and you'd like write back like either like yes, love it, or like not sure about this, or you'd write like really detailed feedback on some stuff, and something you wouldn't write back at all. We'd like resend it. But that one, it was sort of like nothing for a second, and then it was like, this is amazing. Can you send me like extended wave ASAP? Like I want to put it in my sets. And we were like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's kind of a similar story with End Control, right? It's sort of almost like a sister piece to that in a way. It's something that, yeah, I guess my DJ sets like play into this whole thing quite a bit because what I'm usually looking for to get in my sets is not really songs. I have so many songs that I play in my sets, like Lane 8 songs. And so we've released so many amazing songs on TNH, but like in terms of actually playing them in my sets, not that many of them make it in. Whereas instrumental tracks, like I'm always looking for more of those as kind of like these little anchor points or like little transitions from one moment to the next. And I feel like End Control, R&R are both kind of hit that perfect note for me. So I think it's, yeah, my perspective is definitely skewed by me looking for a very specific sound and a very specific thing for my sets. And that ends up being like the song that I really like hone in and focus on. But for me, it was like, this is great. This will be like a perfect thing that I can play in my sets. And it was like, I mean, again, I just hammered that track in almost every single set around that time for a long time. People like who came to the shows then developed like that connection to it as well. So it was kind of cool to see.
Well, I think it was a big record for us because you played it so much and everyone kind of like remembered it from your sets all the time. So it was awesome.
Yeah. It had the coveted first track on the mixtape spot, which is like, I feel like every TNH artist is like, that's like a wow, you know, because it sort of just has like a special thing. So
yeah, that takes me back to like when I first started Lane 8, and there was a DJ called The Magician who he was part of Aeroplane, and then he split off and did his solo project. And he had these magic tapes that went out, and it was sort of like in a similar vein to my seasonal mixes, just sort of like 5 to 10 years before. And some of my early stuff made it in that. And I remember the feeling of like you would, because I was such a fan of that mix series. And I remember the feeling of hearing your song like in the context of the mix. And it was just like, it was so mind blowing. And it was like, that was actually the moment where I was like, okay, I'm really onto something here. I should probably quit my job.
but that, by the way, that feeling, I feel like that feeling of when another artist that you really respect and admire plays your song, like it puts it in a mix or plays it live, no matter how, I mean, I feel this way since I was like 19, that happened for the first time. And now it's like 20 plus years later, it's like, I still feel exactly the same way. Doesn't matter how many tracks it's happened with, doesn't matter how much success or whatever you've had as an artist, the feeling of when someone you really like plays your record, or someone you really respect plays your record, it's always the same. Like you're just like, cool, yeah. And
the key phrase there is someone you really like.
Yeah, that number did get smaller as you get older.
I feel like I don't know. It feels to me like in recent years that sort of serendipitous random DJ support it kind of doesn't feel like it's happening as much anymore, because I feel like there are such tightly defined cliques now and labels, and like everything is very optimized. I mean, there are still DJs who are playing like a wide range of music. But it almost feels to me like people are kind of like staying more like in a lane, like it has to be this, it has to be that, or like if a track goes out on a certain label, then certain DJs won't play it. But it's definitely always a nice surprise when stuff gets played in an unexpected environment.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us again. We, yeah, this is like, yeah, forever now.
Hey.
It's got the vinyl.
Still in plastic.
I was going to say, that thing is going to go for some money on Discogs.
Yeah. I'm going to wait about 30 years and then I'll get it up there.
All right, cool.
Mint condition.
We'll talk to you again soon for the next episode where we talk about Endless Dawn. So look forward to that chat too.
Looking forward to it.
Will you stay here with me?
Hello. All right, so we have a wonderful, beautiful, amazing guest with us. This is Tishmal, everybody. Hi.
Hi.
Nice to see you. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's so fun to chat.
I know, it's so nice to see you. I think we've just been talking about our albums, and we're talking about Forever Now, and of course, for us, the first thing that comes up to our mind with Forever Now is when we wrote Losing Ground with you, and that sort of 2 days in the studio that we had. So I think from our perspective, we just kind of wanted to know, I mean, we know what it felt like for us, but like, what was that like for you? What was going on in your life, in the period when we wrote that track?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, it's such a beautiful album. Like, all of your music is so beautiful. And that was something I remember even from the beginning, like, I was really taken aback. So my husband has, as you know, we've talked about this before, is like such a fan of you guys and has been for a long time. And his name is Tanner, and we both love to make playlists. And he organizes him by like the year. I organize mine by like vibe and mood. But he's very, he's got his methods. And I think he had one of your tracks. I think it was from Something Everything. Yeah, it was Assassin. He was so into that track. And so McKay, one of the co-writers, he had reached out to me and was like, hey, these musicians I worked with, this DJ duo, they're so cool. Check them out. And I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that song. Yeah, love their music. And I was just taken aback. It was so lush and so beautiful. And I remember telling my husband, like, oh, yeah, I think I'm going to jump in a session with these guys. And he was like, what? And he was like freaking out and so excited because he was a fan. And that made it really, really fun. And yeah, from the beginning, I just remember like, wow, this is really beautiful music. And it felt just super refreshing at the time. And I think even though that was my initial reaction was like, oh, this feels so fresh. And I know a lot of your fans have said similar things of your music. But as I've become more and more familiar in this world that you guys are creating with these albums, it's just so fun to be part of. So yeah, that was my initial reaction. And I was so stoked. And we got into the studio, and I was also in a place, I mean, this was a couple years ago, where I had recently left kind of the culture and religion that I grew up in. And there was a lot of grief in the chaos of making that decision to step away and to find my own authentic path. And my husband was aligned with me. We both grew up in this religion that we've stepped away from. And it felt like in this period, like I was like, I have a new life. Like I have all this freedom of my thought and my spirit, my soul to make these decisions. And we worked on a couple little melody ideas. I remember you guys had me sing over a bunch of different ideas, and Losing Ground was like, whoa, we need to do something with this one. But I remember like looking to you and looking to McKay and everyone in the room just being like, I don't know if I want to feel sad. And because I was in this place where I just was like, I have this new life. I want everything to be happy. And I just want to live in this like celebratory space. But it was such a good experience. I remember everyone, you both were just like, hey, that's okay. Like, I think we can go there. And I remember vividly, like, like looking at my shoes. I was wearing these like Doc Marten boots and just being like, all right, like I'm not afraid to like feel. Let's go there. And you guys made it such a safe space. And then we just, I don't know, the song kind of just took off from there.
I always feel like I'm pushing you into a space that's like really, you're like, no. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I just felt that your voice and like you have so much vulnerability in your personality, and like, it just kind of went there naturally. I thought that it was a cool space for you to be in. And I still feel that way. And yeah, so I always feel like I'm always like trying to push you out of your comfort zone into doing that thing. And I know it's hard, but I always feel like the results are so good. And
Yeah. No, I think that's one of the differences between like writing alone versus writing with other writers is you have these sounding boards. And one of the things I love about working with you both is that you do make it a safe space. And I think my natural instinct is like, okay, are we going to go there? Because it's a collaborative thing. And sometimes you'll get in a room where not everyone wants to, and not everyone feels like they're safe enough to be vulnerable. And I think that's what's so special about the music you make is that you create this space where people can be vulnerable. And again, like the music carries you through those feelings and it supports you. And music is so powerful that way.
Yeah, I feel like we spent so many hours and we could just keep spending hours hanging out together in the studio writing stuff.
You know, it's so fun. I love it.
so lyrically, because Losing Ground lyrics, they're pretty sad. They're sort of related to, they feel related to a relationship, but it's not clear what kind of relationship. It could be familial. And a lot of it's about, getting old and dying and when that person's not around, right?
Yeah, it's such a powerful little few lines. Like I was thinking about the words. Yeah, it's just like this little poem. But even the concept of losing ground, I was thinking about it a lot. Like there's so much change that happens, and that visual of what is it, the line when the hills turn brown and like there's this broken sea, like there's this hike that we love to do and it leads out to this big hill and it's just like all like you see the ocean below and like that visual is so strong in my mind. So I loved when like the album artwork has the ocean. I'm an ocean girl, so I love that. But back to the losing ground concept, it's like you're up on this hill, you're high, you're looking out, but then the feeling of like uncertainty that happens with change. I don't know. I remember at the time I had been reading this book. What is it called? The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. That one, which I don't know how I feel about the book, but I remember this one really profound kind of theme throughout it was like sometimes there can be this dangerous sense of overconfidence in life where you feel like so certain in your choices, but there's also this feeling that is very common for people where you doubt yourself, where you doubt your beliefs. And as you get older, as like you're going through the change, those feelings can come up and it can be a sign of a really good thing. And I love how the poem like ends with this vulnerable question, like all this stuff could be changing, we could be getting old. It can mean whatever you need it to mean as a listener. But then at the end, it's such a vulnerable thing to say, will you stay here with me? And that could mean so many things. It could mean like, will you fight for this love? Will you just be here beside me? Will you stay here with me even though I know you're going through such an awful thing? And it gives this like feeling of, even though the words are sad, like we've all established like, oh yeah, this is a sad feeling. It still has that little zinger of hope that's you're not alone. And that was like, oof, ah, and that feeling of uncertainty, like you can be like, it's okay. Like when you're uncertain about life, I think, and the book that I had been reading at the time, the steady versus the unsteady, like losing ground. You're walking and it feels like you're just sinking in some ways and you're questioning. And it's just this feeling of vulnerability, unsteadiness, like that can point to a really good heart. It means like you're thinking of others, you're pondering, you're doing critical thinking, which is just such a good skill. And yeah, the fact that it's all just ends with that moment of empathy, I think is just, that's a special thing.
Sadness with some hope is kind of like our MO. So it's like,
Why do you think that is? Where do you guys feel like that comes from?
I don't know. Since we met, it's like, it's so weird. Like we just, like our first track, it was like sad, but weirdly hopeful. And I feel like that's kind of just the emotion that, it's like if you mix two colors, right? If you mix yellow and blue, you get green. It's like Ossama and I are very different people and like musicians, but when you mix us together, that's the color that comes out. Like it's weird, but that's why it's so cool that you were able to tap into that, because like we were just like, yes, like this feels perfect. Yeah, it feels so good. Well, thank you so much for being on this one. That's
Thanks
beautiful.
for having me.
Yeah.
All right, we are gonna get back in with McKay for Forever Now, which another great album which you were a great part of. We can talk about the collaboration with Tishmal.
Another phenomenal album, another amazing human being and soul, and that was definitely super magic to, getting in with her and you guys, and that her voice floats so well over like the soundscapes that you guys design. And I think like she has, such a poetic soul as well, that it was really cool to get in together, all four of us in a room, talk about ideas, go through various melodies to find kind of like what that losing ground eventually became. And it was just such a special feeling. I think every time we've worked on art together, like I've always had like the chills or my hair standing on end on my arm of just like emotional moments of finding what I think was important for all of us in the room to connect on a soul level first, but knowing that it's art that can transmute energy and like heal humans, and using that through the sound design you guys are doing, as well as like melodies and lyrics and everything. And I think we really found something special there with her voice, the melodies, the lyrics, the soundscape of, man, this I think is something human beings really need to let wash over them. Just get this as a sound bath or something,
And I think also that was like, because White Lies had been on the first album, we were like, yo, and let's try to do another one. And you were like, you sent us a few different vocalists that you were working with, and you sent us Tishmal. So you were the one who brought her into the project.
That's right.
Yeah,
and
you guys were like, we love her voice. Bring her in. I was like, yeah, let's do this.
If you ever follow McKay on social media, you'll know that he's always has these gatherings of like all these different artists that come together and come to wherever you are, I guess. And you invite everyone to come and like sing and jam and do stuff, right?
Yeah. I love it, man. I think art is the most important thing on earth. I think we're all old enough. We've lived many different versions of ourselves. And I think I went through a lot just kind of being in a crazy wilderness as a teenager, then like finding what I at the time thought was like a truth of like God in a spiritual form at that time in the early 20s, and then getting into like a scientific PhD program. Then I was like, okay, the new God is like science and it has to be empirical and proven through this. But like I was missing so much of the art and the music that I'd created my whole life. And it was like, it's only black or white, and same with certain forms of religion. It's just black or white. And I think when you get into the minutia of like human beings, there is no black and white. Everything is gray. Like I love the stories of any, like the Joker, where it's like you can take a villain and show like, no, this is a human being, and they had certain circumstances and they made certain choices along the way, and we might have all made those same choices if we were we don't know. That I think there's something so interesting about art is not black or white. It doesn't say this is the truth and that is not the truth. It's subjective so that it can speak to each one of us in the way that our souls need to be spoken to. It kind of goes back to like old, like Plato's The Republic and his allegory of the cave, and so much of like Aristotle and Plato and early Greek philosophers, their view on the world was that not of a blank slate or tabula rasa, but the view of you have all the truth you ever need inside of you already. And that just needs to be unlocked. And it can be unlocked through the philosophers or dialogue, but it can also be unlocked through external world, just your experience in whatever. And I think that for me and most human beings, I think art is what unlocks that. Like I've found my most truths or the best intuition or whatever when listening to music, watching one of my favorite films, or some piece of art that just was like, oh, and it breaks me down to tears and tells me, here's the truth that you need right now. Here's the next breadcrumb along the way. And I think working with you guys, that is what it is. And it's crazy that like I get to say this and we get to say this at our age, that like when I was a kid, I was so obsessed with poetry and music. And to now be able to write poetry and music for a living with people like you, that like, what I love, I mean, I love a million things about you guys, and I don't know how much of your fan base knows very much, but like how talented and knowledgeable and how much experience you have over the years. And also that like certain artists that I work with, they're managers in the session, they're A&Rs in the session. There's 10 other people from the label that have opinions. It's just not real art. It's just trying to be manufactured into a formulaic pop song or whatever think will make money on an algorithm, or like there's too much noise to make pure authentic art. And I think with you guys, it's like, yeah, there's always been 4 of us in a room. We just talk about what's on our hearts or what we're going through, what's important or what we think people might resonate with and that like we really feel. And then we just start going through it. That like, it's just so nice to make art with people that are real artists, have the talent and ability, and just don't have to worry about other people's opinions. I think you guys told me somewhat around the journey of finally really coming back to yourselves for what you had already done and already loved. And I think everything with Lane 8 and This Never Happened has helped cultivate that within you to be like, we love what you guys do. Just do you, And to be in a room with you guys in a headspace like that of like, let's just make what we love here. And the label's going to love it. Everybody's going to love it. Our fan base is going to love it. And that's been just, I don't know, like for people like me, dude, it's the things that I'm most grateful for in life, because I get to live my dream of writing poetry and geeking out over this lyric and place it here and edit this. And what if we did a double thing here? And what if maybe like the bigger picture starts to show up and you're like, oh my gosh, this could be the thing, It gets me so excited. And you guys are so into the same kinds of things. I think we've traveled similar journeys in our lives at different points, musically, artistically, all of that. And you're such artists that I'm just so in awe and so grateful to be in your presence and collaborating at any point in time.
Thanks, man. When
Thank
people can
you.
see what it's like to be in a session with you, when you just get like, it's great. I'm like, this is exactly what happens in the session. We just like talk, get excited about weird stuff, and then
We go off for like an
we
hour
go off
and then
for
we come
tangents,
back
and then we're like,
we-
okay, well, what if? But it's interesting what you're saying, and it reminds me of that thing. I think Ethan Hawke was the one who put it together, or maybe he just posted it, but that people think art is like a luxury, and he said, yeah, until, your father dies, or, someone breaks your heart, or like something really intense happens. And then the only person who can express how you feel is a poet or an artist. And then all of a sudden that becomes like your lifeline. I think that, like you're very much in that space. And I feel like it's good as artists to be reminded and to be around people who are always kind of in that place where like, no, this is like the most important thing. Because when you're listening to a piece of music and it hits you, it does reflect the most important thing that's going on in your life. And it's very easy to lose track of that, in the music industry and in life. You can just think, oh, this is a job, or it's not successful, or whatever, but you're not thinking about how it's affecting other people or what it might be doing for other people, in the same way that what music is done for us, and done for you in terms of helping us just through different difficult parts of life, or maybe realizing things about ourselves, or just being kind of the soundtrack to something very special. And yeah, I feel like it's like, I always know that you're going to be like 110% on that page. You're like, great. It's awesome.
Sometimes I have to dial it back.
Yeah,
for
no,
certain
it's
people,
great.
but
I love it.
I don't have to give the watered down version with you guys, and I
No.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think like with the thing you were talking about with Ethan Hawke, like one of the things in my thesis and dissertation for my program in psychology, my title page is this quote from Plato where he was saying that the most important people to choose in a society first are your storytellers, because those storytellers will forever dictate how the society views their world, feels about their world, and acts in their worlds and relates to other people in their world. And it's just hard because in our day and age, and this, I'm not predicting doom or anything like that, but in a downfall of any civilization, art is less important. Storytellers are less important. And right now, storytellers, the storytellers that are most popular are just being chosen by an algorithm on TikTok for what goes viral, like a virus. We love cancer right now. It's a virus. We want to go viral. And it doesn't mean that it's important or where we should steer the ship. And I think that that's what Plato was saying. And they're trying to say, hey, if you're creating whatever it is, and if it's this kingdom or whatever, pick your storytellers first, because they can enlighten the mind. They can elevate the soul. And I think that that's the art you guys are making, is not to be like, let's get popular and make a lot of money, and we lose ourselves when we search for that. And I understand it, because it's in the industry, it's hard to get by. You want to make money, you want to be able to have success and everything. But, I think what you guys have found and what's been so beautiful from when I met you in your journey is like connecting again with what was always your authentic self, and finding that there was the audience there who wanted that, and then connecting with not fake fans who loved you for making something that was pretty and pop and what everyone else was doing, but real fans that were dedicated, like a cult classic following, to be like, dang, we're just pumping out our sound waves from our heart, and these people are authentically, frequencing on the same thing. And that, like, coming back to like losing ground, like we were in the room kind of like, yeah, this is just a simple poem. Like, it's a very simple poem. We could add more to it, but sometimes this most simplest poem, like Rupi Kaur, like I love all of her books. The Sun and Her Flowers is like one of the greatest books of poetry ever assembled. All her books are, but like some of the greatest poems are the simplest, and some of the most beauty we get from human beings are the simplest, but they're so richly layered and so deep that it can just speak to us different things at different times across our journey as a son, a daughter, a mother, a father, a grandparent, and we're just, oh man, like now this losing ground feels even more important, and it speaks to me in this way and reverberates off my soul and gives me a new meaning. And it's so cool what we can do playing with simplicity and putting the storytelling and the art form first, and not thinking, this isn't the formula that's popping off right now. How would this ever go viral, But just saying, hey, man, we're all here crying to this piece of art. There's something special about it,
Yeah, that's perfectly said.
Perfect.
Yeah, totally. All right, well, I don't have anything else left to say about this album. But yeah, this is great, man. We appreciate you being on here, and we have more to talk about because you were really involved in Endless Dawn. So for our next episode, we'll be back with you about that. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. See you later.
So we're going to talk to the one and only Delhia de France, who has become a very close friend of ours, and is the writer and singer and co-producer of the amazing Zima off of Forever Now, which we've been talking about on this episode. Hi.
Hi, guys.
I mean, we've been talking about this album Forever Now, and we've been talking about Zima too, and how important of a song it was for this album.
I know for us, we were super excited that you actually came back and had written vocals on that record, because we really thought like you were too cool for us, and that you were doing all these awesome records. You did Home with Adriatic, and then you had done Claire with Anima, and we're just like, you have such a special voice, and we're like, we'd love to work with this incredible singer. And so when Tabby from This Never Happened wrote us back and said that you had done the vocals for this record, we were like, I can't believe it. And we had
It took me a while, no? I was
Yeah,
taking
it
my
did,
sweet
it
time.
did.
in the last minute.
It
Last
did.
minute.
I remember you guys were going back and forth because you had watched this robot episode on Zima called
Yeah.
Zima Blue, right?
Yeah.
And that's where it kind of the
Yeah.
name
The title.
started from.
Yeah.
Did you start the song like this? Like, was that when you watched the episode and you were like,
No. We made that instrumental, and we were talking about how that instrumental was like we were obsessed with it, and we didn't think it necessarily needed a vocal, but we sent it out, and we called it Zima because I had just been watching the Netflix Love, Sex, Love, Death, Robots?
Love, Death, and Robots? Yeah.
And the Zima Blue episode is so beautiful. It's such an amazing piece of art. Yeah, I remember I told you afterwards. And so we called it Zima, and your song and like the lyrics you wrote, like we were talking about. I remember we were texting a lot about the title, and we were like, what should it be? And you were like, I don't want it to be so obvious. And I was like, but this is somehow that word and that episode, it somehow fit the song. Like, even though they have nothing to do with each other, and you had nothing to do with what you were writing about, and it was just kind of a random name for us. I don't know. I feel like you watched it, and I remember you writing back being like, yep, this is cool. I like this. And I was like, great, let's just leave it.
Yeah, because I think when you sent it to me and you had called it Zima, I was like, oof, is it because of that episode? Because I also had seen it and I really loved it. For me, it stood out from all of the episodes. This was the one where I really connected to, and that was kind of very inspiring. And for me, there definitely is a connection, because I'm saying something like mind is blue or something, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, totally.
And then it was like, Zima, duh, why not keep the name? Which I honestly rarely do, because I always like to be the one naming the track, because I obviously kind of put words to it. But I love that. I love that it has a completely, because it doesn't open a concept. It just is something which doesn't put a picture in your mind immediately.
Yeah.
And I also liked how the track was very, very vibey and very flowy, and it had this kind of watery vibe that I love. So yeah, was a fit.
Yeah. You're also, what we discovered in the process of making that song was that you're a very, very good producer, and specifically for vocal production, you really knew what you were talking about, and like had very specific ideas about how you wanted your voice to sound. And we were doing a lot of back and forth, and we were like really taken by it, and it made the song so much better. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, especially with women in the industry, that they don't get credited for the work they do as producers too. Even if people just think, oh, they're the voice.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you did the work, but yeah, I sometimes just have very specific ideas for the sound, and I'm very happy that you guys were like, okay, we're open for this. Let's try this out, make it a bit more gritty, and especially, yeah, of course, with the vocals, because I love vocal production. I record myself. I immediately have a sound in my mind, and then I need to get there. And I need to I love just trying out different plugins or different vibes. And I think it really changes the vocals and the vibe of a track so much when you really go into, also producing the vocals as a sound, basically. And I'm glad that you were very open to this.
Yeah. I remember sending Dan Lane 8 the track afterwards, because he heard the demo, and then we did a lot of back and forth on the vocal stuff, and he was like, is it done? And because the deadline was like going down, I was like, oh, it's almost done. And then we sent it back, and I was like, sorry, it took longer. And he's like, whatever you guys did sounds amazing. Like, it was worth it. And I was like, oh, great. I was like, he's not gonna be able to tell the difference. And he was like, no, it sounds really cool. So
yeah, amazing. I mean, it's more about the feel at the end, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't even need to be what have you done, but it's more about the vibe at the end. I think so too.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to talk about with you was the fact that you, for those of you who've seen our live show, or are going to see our live show, that
Yeah, haven't seen it in real time.
yeah, you haven't seen it in real time, but Delhia helped make a beautiful visual for it. I don't want to say too much. I don't want to give it away, but she went above and beyond to make a really, really cool moment happen in our show.
It's the best moment in the show.
Yeah, it's such a cool.
Oh, it was so much fun.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. I'm happy you asked me.
You were like, yep, I got this, and
It was a big ask.
yeah, it was a big ask.
It was a big
Yeah,
ask.
it was a really.
At first I was like, ooh, and then I thought how cool it is to actually like sing the song live with you in a way,
Yeah,
like in a non-physical way. And then when you said me how it looked like, and the whole stage design, and you standing there, and it looks very beautiful. And I have to say, the shoot for me also was very special because everyone it was a whole female group, the DOP, the director, the gaffer, the studio manager, and the makeup artist. It was like this whole girls thing, and it was such an amazing vibe. We had so much fun. It was great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Like we're definitely gonna do more.
Yes.
More
Please.
I'd
songs.
love to.
Yeah.
You know what, guys? When you reached out to me, or Tabby was reaching out to me, I always look at people, and I immediately got a good vibe.
From us?
Just from your photos, yeah. And I was like, these guys look cool. These guys look really nice and kind. I'm just gonna do it. And I like the track. Obviously, I have to like the track. That's a given, of course. But then, furthermore,
That's cool.
And-
I'm like,
and
really?
I was
Us? Like,
yeah, that's a nice. I like the vibe of you guys. So
thank
I
you.
think it's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, we definitely, I think, and now having made a bunch more music together, I feel like we definitely need to get back in again. And
I hope so.
yeah, we will for
Very
sure.
excited.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for talking to us.
Thanks
This
for
is
having me.
Super cool. And
We'll see you in the studio in
yeah, we'll see you
a
in the
couple
studio
of
in a few weeks.
I hope so.
Okay, cool. Ciao. All right. So we're almost at the end of this episode, but we have to do our final question
Why?
because we did it on the last one,
Okay.
which was the question we get asked a lot. We've rephrased it a bit, but it's if you have desert island, you're on a desert island and you have to take one song from Forever Now, what's it going to be?
Tricky question. For me, I think it would be Eleanor. But I say that now. That changes all the time.
You love that song.
I love that song.
It's a great song, and we've never played it live.
No,
No.
we have not. But the instrumental itself, even before Andrew put his gorgeous vocals on, was something that we created literally after our first album.
Yeah.
It was like in this in-between phase.
Yeah.
We went back to our sampling roots rather than
Yeah.
actually using synths. And there's just an emotion in that record. And then as soon as Andrew put his vocals, it just like
Amazing,
amplified that emotion. So today, I would say I'm taking Eleanor with me. What about you?
Oh, man. It's a tie.
Can't do
no tie.
ties. No
It's
ties.
an 11-way tie.
No ties.
I think Zima. Ultimately, I probably have to say Zima. I was gonna say Forever Now because I just love that record and I love the way we've ended a lot of shows with it and just made it very special. But Zima to me is like, well, even with the instrumental before Delhia was on it, I was so obsessed with it, and then when she got on it, it was like took it to a different level. And similarly, I think if you're obsessed with the instrumental and then you hear how the vocal makes it even better, it kind of makes the track really special. So,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, I did that one. Great. So thank you for watching this episode. Thanks to Tishmal and McKay and Dan, Lane 8, and Delhia for being on this episode, and we'll see you for episode 3, Endless Dawn, very soon.